Can the European Parliament declare war? What about taxes? Can the European Parliament levy taxes on EU citizens? Sanctions, Russia and all that? Does the European Parliament decide sanctions? No is the answer to all those questions, and would you believe it, the European Parliament can't even propose binding EU legislation. So, I hear you ask, what's the point of the European Parliament? Well, that's a very good question. My name is Justin Stairs, and this is a Brussels Signal Explainer. Lovely weather here. Anyway, this June, 200 million people, maybe more, will be voting for the privilege of sending 720 MEPs, Euro MPs, to this esteemed assembly. But what do they actually do in these buildings? Well, I've been here working for almost 20 years, and I can tell you with a great deal of assurance that it's all boring. I mean, boring for the public. You can come to visit the European Parliament if you're a tourist, and if you get into one of these committee rooms in here, I guarantee you will not understand what they're talking about. But it might be boring for the public, but it is not at all boring for industry. And this is function number one of the European Parliament. They amend legislation. It is an amending chamber, and industry loves MEPs because they can insert a word here into the legislation, take a word out from that piece of legislation, and that saves them money or maybe makes them money. Okay, so industry lobbyists, of which there are tens of thousands here in Brussels, they love the European Parliament and they swoop on MEPs whenever they see them in order to get a good word in. That's function number one. Now, if they tell you, oh no, that's not true, Justin, we actually do propose our own legislation, well, that's not quite true. They have what they call own initiative reports, in which they can say whatever they like, but these own initiative reports are then ignored by everyone. So they don't propose legislation, they amend it. Function number one. What's function number two? So, does anything interesting go on at all in the European Parliament? Well, there is a second function, and that is the soapbox function. What does that mean? Well, if you're canny and you get elected to the European Parliament, you can use your speaking time and convert those clips into viral sensations. The classic example of this was probably Nigel Farage, the British Brexiteer, who in a very sort of funny way made fun of people or even insulted people in the Parliament, and these clips went viral. There are other people doing it. Guy Verhofstadt is one of my favorites. He's a Belgian liberal, and he goes on and on about more Europe. All we need is more Europe. It's the solution to everything. Whatever question you ask him, the answer will be more Europe. Mick Wallace is another one that comes to mind. He's an Irish lefty. Gunnar Beck is also quite a good talker. Anyway, they're all over the place now, all over the political spectrum. If you do it properly, the European Parliament can be a soapbox or a stepping stone onto greater things. That's the second function of the European Parliament. So we're just opposite the Parliament building now. This building behind me that you can see is the embassy of one of the German Länder. I think it's Bavaria, and as you can see, it's bigger than most national embassies would be. Anyway, back to our story. The third function of the European Parliament is as an arena for traditional ideological fights. They sit in a hemisphere. There's a left, a right wing, and a centre, and there are fights between the left and the right on issues such as migration, but the big ideological battle is in fact not the political spectrum, but between those who are pro-EU and anti-EU or Eurosceptic. Now, the vast majority of MEPs throughout the history of the European Parliament have been pro-EU. I guess it makes sense if you want to come to Brussels. But that's changing now. And according to some projections, after the June elections, there could be maybe a quarter of all MEPs flying the Eurosceptic flag. Now, a quarter is obviously far short of a majority, but so will that make a difference? Well, it could do, because the quarter will have sympathisers from within the mainstream or even from the left on certain subjects, and together with these sympathisers they might be able to make a difference, reject some proposals from the European Commission. Now, the European Parliament is obviously only one of the EU institutions, and it's the European Commission where the real power lies, and the final function of the European Parliament is to control the European Commission, which they don't really do. The European Parliament claims on its website that it elects the President of the European Commission. Nonsense. The European Commission President is confirmed by the Parliament. Let's face it, in an election there's more than one candidate, isn't there? But by the time this candidate gets to the Parliament, MEPs have one choice, say yes or no. It's sort of Soviet-style democracy, you could call it. The Parliament does have other powers to keep the Commission in check, such as sack the entire Commission. But this is a very blunt power, and it's only ever been used once, and that was back in 1999. MEPs can reject nominations for individual commissioners, but they can't sack commissioners once they're in place. If they could sack commissioners, that would actually be very useful. It might keep some of them in check. The other thing you should bear in mind if you're going to vote this June is that Ursula von der Leyen, the EC president, is up for, not re-election, reappointment. And if there is a change in the composition of the Parliament, maybe some kind of swing to the right, she might not have the majority that she needs in the Assembly to be reappointed. So if you don't like her, well, you know what to do. You can vote for one of these parties that doesn't like her as well. For once, maybe your vote could make a difference in June, and the elections won't be that boring after all. Take care.